While it's great to study and improve on things like anatomy and perspective, you never want to forget why you're learning in the first place. That's why in this video, I want to share with you my design process for creating character illustrations, as well as highlight why Clip Studio Paint is usually my software of choice to get the bulk of the work done. I think it goes without saying now that this video is sponsored by Clip Studio Paint, but I am not kidding when I say that I love the program. I've been a happy user since I first discovered it as Manga Studio way back in my first year of college, late 2013. I thought it was amazing to be able to use the same professional software that comic and manga artists were using, and I never thought I'd be using it professionally for my own work today. So first things first, when you want to start a new painting, you need an idea. Usually I start by gathering references first to come up with a composition. However, this time around, my friend Sarah was so kind enough to provide me with a few photos of herself to use for her likeness. Slowing down to take the time to study her features was a really important step. I knew my ideas would change a lot down the road, and this helped me keep the most important features I wanted to replicate visible throughout the entire process. After gathering several other references from Pinterest, I created a few thumbnails from ideas that I got inspired by Sarah's face. I quickly realized though that I couldn't ignore my passion for perspective, so I switched the main image to another one with a low angle view. At this stage, I actually prefer to draw on my iPad since the experience feels more like drawing on paper and is extremely accurate and feels like real time. It's amazing how Clip Studio Paint updates so regularly and is available not only on Windows PCs, but Android, iOS, and Mac computers as well. For the majority of this video, I'm using it on the newest Apple Silicon chip, and it works like a charm. Looking at older artwork and coming up with a rough game plan is extremely helpful. I knew that I wanted a dynamic pose and that I would focus on drawing/line work over everything else. I even decided not to do a special second cleanup pass for this piece in order to keep the energy of the sketch present in the final image. I want to point out that it's really important to be loose and free at this stage. I didn't even stress about tracing the image because I was confident with my skill level to be able to manipulate the features into something more stylized. Tracing helped me save a bunch of time, and it's always okay to do if you have lots of reference that you've taken of yourself or have explicit permission to use from the owner of the reference. Once I have my idea down, sketching is my favorite part. This is technically drawing, but I like to say sketching because it really conveys the pace and freedom I'm drawing with. This is where probably my favorite thing about Clip Studio Paint comes into play, the brushes and the brush engine itself. I love how the brushes are organized and set up clearly for anyone new to the program. They feel super natural and have tons of small, easy to understand settings to tweak how they react to your pen pressure. There are also several different tool types, which allows me to keybind each one to a different finger on my Razer keypad for maximum efficiency when drawing. You have the pencil, the pen, the airbrush, blending, eraser, and paintbrush tools, all with their own separate settings and options. Clip Studio Paint also has an amazingly fast selection tool menu that lets you flip, copy/cut and paste whatever you want as soon as you complete the lasso tool selection. You can keep selecting more or remove parts of your selection too while you're at it. As someone who has a lot of trouble visualizing what I want to draw, I usually put something down onto the page and then have to correct it afterwards. And my brain also likes to focus highly on the details of something and the individual parts and then ignore the overall composition. So this is really helpful when you end up noticing that the arms, for example, are in the wrong perspective 2 hours later, and then you need to make some quick changes. The new addition of the Liquify tool only helps this process even more. I love how here it's a brush that you can quickly use to tweak your illustration without having to open a big clunky window to test things out. Now, moving on to the more refinement stage, after a quick critique from my friend, the sketch becomes more like a typical drawing process, and I really start to dial in my lines here to make more slow and deliberate decisions with the marks I want to make. The in-depth but intuitive brush settings are very helpful here, and I'm constantly tweaking them to get the best results as I draw. If you feel like you ever have any lag in this software, turning off these settings is probably going to be what's going to help you. But let's say the brush settings weren't cutting it and I needed another brush. Well, this has happened before, and what I did was utilize another amazing feature in Clip Studio Paint. Turns out there's an entire store available right within the app that you can use to search for different brushes, textures, etc., and import right into your toolset in the software. Many of the most popular ones on the store though are free, and so you can tweak the settings even further after they're installed. The best thing is that there's really no extra cost to use this part of the app, and it's really fantastic for anyone new who wants to explore things more freely. And one other amazing setting that I just discovered while I was making this video is the convert brightness to opacity option under the edit menu. This really saved me because if you have a sketch layer with black lines that you accidentally merge some white into from the background, this button will instantly give you a perfectly transparent sketch layer again that you can overlay onto your flats just like normal without having to set the layer to multiply. Speaking of flats, this is the next part that I do in the process, and Clip Studio Paint is really known to shine here for its amazing fill tool options. There are even special brushes on the Clip Studio Paint store that make it even faster to fill in areas if you have a really complex painting. I, however, like to separate larger, more general areas like the skin, clothing, and hair to keep the shading process simpler in the next step. For the tattoo design on her arm and obliques, I imported some free-to-use images from a website called Unsplash and used the distortion tools to fit them around the main character's arm. I recommend using the perspective warp first and then use the mesh transformation tool to get it perfect. I love how you can set the number of points in the mesh gradually so that you can work from big to small. The flatting process can be the most tedious, however, so I find myself wanting to do it somewhere else or just to be more comfy and away from the desk since it doesn't take too much brain power. Fortunately, Clip Studio Paint has a cloud feature where you can upload your work after you've finished closing that actual piece and then import it via Wi-Fi connection from any other device that you have that can run Clip Studio Paint, regardless of which platform it's on. This is great if you're on the go and you have some easy things that you want to tweak on your iPad, or you just have some time to get some extra work done. The flatting process usually reveals issues with the drawing that I have to go back and fix, so I'm planning to work on doing silhouette studies and leave out parts of the drawings to finish later in the sketch phase to discover better compositions and designs for my illustrations. Now we arrive at my second favorite part of the process, the shading. As an artist, I really enjoy lighting and values over color. I just really love when forms come together, and it reminds me of when I used to draw traditionally with pencil. Slowly hatching away at the values and then changing my pencil's hardness as needed, and then eventually building up the perfect transition of values for like the cheek melting into the lower eyelid, or to convey the ever so subtle creases in the lips was just so satisfying, and I love being able to have that same feeling in digital art. My strategy is to create a grayscale shading and lighting layer, each set to multiply or screen blending modes respectively. This part of the process takes the longest, but it also has the most creative freedom henceforth. So I like to use some filters to tweak how the tattoo textures look on the arm in Clip Studio Paint, but I also like to export high resolution PNGs by using the merge visible layers to new layer option, and then I take those PNGs and apply filters on them in other software and then bring them back into Clip Studio Paint to refine the details further. So even though I do use a lot of layers and groups to separate things, I'm constantly merging and creating new updated versions of the file to eventually reach just one image, one flat layer that I just straight paint onto with no other layers in addition. I also like to test out different crops with a folder above everything else, containing layers that have these black borders with different aspect ratios around them. Shading can easily get overdone, so I often recommend using Clip Studio's preview settings to test things or fix values in specific areas. So what I do is I download a grayscale.icc profile and then bring it into the Clip Studio Paint ICC profiles folder with the other ones. Then inside Clip Studio Paint, I set the preview to that same profile I imported, and this allows me to see the entire canvas in grayscale, but I'm still able to paint in color and color pick in color. This is best done though after you already have all the colors you need on the canvas. That way you can just focus on getting the best values you need or fixing any that you noticed were off, and then you can change the preview back to whatever you are using to see the colors. At the end of the day though, I do a little bit of post-processing to prepare the painting for sharing on social media, but video is becoming the more effective option these days a lot of times. So what's cool about Clip Studio Paint is that you can record a time lapse as soon as you start a new canvas and then export it at any point while you're painting. This gives you a shareable .mp4 file to show off your process online with a cool time-lapse video. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look into my illustration process and maybe even learned a bunch of cool new things about Clip Studio Paint. I actually did myself. It's a fantastic software and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to work with them for this video. If you want, you can check out the final painting on my Instagram account @ErgoJosh or check out my website, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace. Keep drawing and stay positive.